Stories are very powerful. I think Nicodemus probably heard some stories about Jesus, and that's why he showed up in the night. Maybe he was a little nervous. Maybe he was being a little cautious. But those stories drew him to Jesus, even though he might have been afraid. I know last night as I got home and started scrolling Facebook like I sometimes do, I was impacted by the stories going on in our world right now. The struggles, the violence, the injustice happening especially in Minneapolis and St. Paul right now is especially disturbing, as again we are faced with violence being used to end the life of someone who is a beloved child of God. And my heart breaks at that. It's hard to live in a world where it seems like weekly we are confronted with these stories. And yet we are not a people who live or grieve without hope, because we do have a bigger picture. And in a lot of ways, I think our world today is not that different from the world that Jesus occupied in the first century. There were empires, there were powers that were doing violence, that were harming their own people, harming other people to get ahead. And this is the world that Jesus entered into. And this, here and now, is the world that Jesus enters into. So like Nicodemus, maybe we approach Jesus with a little bit of timidity, unsure of what to really do or say. But like I say, there is hope. And the hope doesn't dismiss the challenges that we face, the heartbreak that we feel, but hopefully the hope carries us through. And hope is not just a wish for something better. Hope is a belief that there can be better, that there is more, and that God is working in the midst of our world. Now, Jesus brought something strange, as we heard in the children's time, to Nicodemus. This idea of being born again or born from above. There's a transformation that happens. And I think part of that comes through the hope that we experience in community and as God's people. And the stories that Nicodemus was hearing and continued to experience throughout his life were a part of this, being born from above. And in some ways, it makes it sound like this is something that happens one time and it's done. But there's kind of continuing language that happens here. I think we're born from above many times, just as God's grace is new every morning. We are welcomed into this birth from above over and over. And it transforms our lives and our stories and the stories that we can tell. And this comes out of this love that God has for the world and this desire to save it. God sees the trouble we are facing and desires to save us. I don't think that looks like, as much as we might like, just being plucked out of this situation and brought into utopia. But I think we experience in our community here and in our communities beyond this place little bits of that. Little bits that carry us through, and it's those stories that hopefully shape us, not into despair, but into something better. And church is such an important part of that. I honestly don't know sometimes how people function in such a chaotic world without a community around them. And not all folks find that in a church, I recognize that, or in a faith community. But for me, that has been such an important part of what has helped keep me sane throughout the multiple unprecedented times that I have faced in my life. And this idea that God loves the world. It not only has been something that I've heard and I've thought about, but it's something I've felt and lived. Receiving that love from others and being able to give that love in return. And that's the thing that I think is special about church, because we're not only the ones that come and receive the love, but we're the ones that can be a part of bringing it out into the world. When we gather on a Sunday morning or some other time during the week as a church community, it's a place to practice that. And then we go out. We go maybe to our workplace, to our neighborhoods, to our friends, and we live that out. These are the stories, and I want to tell you some more stories today. You may have noticed I didn't bring up my iPad today. I feel like stories need to be told as much as possible without notes. And so I want to tell the story of Silverwood. As much as I know it, there's many of you who have been here for decades longer than I have. But I want to tell you specifically because we're focusing on our annual meeting later today, which has a lot to do with budget and how we spend our money. And the line items in a budget are to some people, wonderful things to see, and I'm grateful for financially minded people. But I think there's also many stories beyond those line items, beyond those numbers. The stories of how each and every one of those gifts that is given becomes a blessing. Sometimes to people here, and oftentimes to people outside of these walls. Now, to start off, I want to bring us to our mission statement. Our mission at Silverwood Mennonite Church is to follow Jesus as the center of our faith, practice community as the center of our lives, and to share the good news of Jesus' hope, grace, salvation, and peace as the center of our work. This is our mission. And when we think about our mission and what we are doing and try to connect that with where our money goes and what it is being used for, there's a few things that pop out. The action words of following Jesus, practicing community, and sharing the good news. These are three things that I think we do, and it is reflected not only in the money that we spend, but the stories that come out of those. And so if we were to divide up our budget to tell this story of how our financial commitment connects with our mission, it breaks out in about this way. About 39% of our finances are used to build practicing community, 33% in following Jesus, and about 28% in sharing the good news. Although I will put an asterisk with that because that does not include Mission Sunday or Good Samaritan Fund or things like that. Those are some more numbers, some more words. But what does that really look like? Well, I think in following Jesus, as we think about following Jesus and what following Jesus looks like for us as a community, I dug back into our archive of photos from the last few years to see. We encourage following Jesus as a congregation through worship, which is often exemplified in our table. I have a photo of that from a few years ago. Obviously, you can see this one here. This is a way we communicate to one another and tell a story. In the center there, you'll see a picture from a Christmas program. I love how in our congregation we do this Christmas program that is not polished. It's not perfect, but it warms my heart. It gives me great joy and great hope. And seeing the kids come up and put themselves out there, and the adults that come alongside them who have been teaching them and encouraging them. That's building something that will last them a lifetime. We have things like youth groups and Sunday school classes where, we heard it in the children's time. Kids are remembering those stories because those stories that they hear in Sunday school are shaping their lives to be more like Jesus. And how wonderful, how powerful would it be if more and more people were shaped to be like Jesus in our world? Youth groups come together. Yes, they have a good time. They have lots of fun. We hear about that all the time. But I also get to hear some of the inside stories. And I'm not going to share specifics. But there are some deep conversations that happen around fires in vans while transporting to winter retreat or to service projects or to convention. There are powerful conversations and bonds that are made there. And just like we want to have healthy attachment with our parents, healthy attachment with a church comes through these kind of moments. Thinking more about our story as we practice community together. Yeah, maybe we're not perfect at it. Maybe that's why we say practice. We keep trying. I think we do pretty well. And you'll see that most of these have food connected with them, which is a good sign, and I think a wonderful thing. I loved walking into the fellowship hall this morning and seeing all the tables set up and all the crock pots plugged in. I am so grateful for the folks that put extra thought into how many plug-ins we will need in our kitchen and surrounding area so we have room for all the crock pots. But it's around these tables that we can connect with one another, that we can learn to know each other better. Because in here, you're all facing me right now, which sometimes feels a little uncomfortable. But at a table, we get to look at each other. We get to share in a real way what life is like. And I hope when you sit down at the table and somebody asks you, how are you doing? Or what's going on in your life? I hope this is a place where we can be honest about that. Willing to celebrate with those who celebrate and learn to grieve with those who grieve. A lot of the practicing community that we do comes from our Community Life Commission and the inspiration that they give us to do things like small groups or the meal that happens on the first Sunday that Gail leads with the soups. And this summer, we got to use our outdoor space for a gathering. And it was neat to see people who I don't often see on a Sunday morning sitting together around the fire, chatting, sharing with each other. There were some pretty deep conversations going on. I was sneaking around with a camera, but my ears were still on. There were some pretty powerful ways that people connect in moments like that and connect around tables. Small groups has been something that have been really powerful for me here at Silverwood as well. It can be tough in a congregation of this size to really know people well. But I think through the small groups that I've been a part of, I got to know a couple new families and new individuals. Currently, I'm a part of a small group where most of us are around my age, and we are all busy people, so we just go out to a restaurant for lunch one Sunday a month, and it's great. It's a nice place to just hang out and to feel connection with folks. I hope that as you think about your small group experiences, that you have memories of connections with folks and stories you could tell. And just a plug, if you've never been a part of one, there's always an opportunity to join. Lastly, I want to talk about our sharing of the good news. And this happens in a lot of ways. We have a commitment as a congregation to give at least 15% of our budget towards what we call our outreach section of the budget. Now, you notice up there it says 28. Well, a good chunk of my time is actually used to do some of this work. We had the Welcome to the Table experience this summer where we provided free meals on Wednesday evenings. And I got to connect with this one couple that lived just across the street. They've experienced some significant financial hardship, and she had experienced significant church trauma. But they saw the sign that said, free meal. And they braved the doors of the church, not knowing anyone, sat at a table, not knowing if anyone would join them. And then conversations happened. They were able to share a little bit of their story, a little bit of their struggle. They were able to receive prayer from one of the pastors. I connected with one of them later and heard a lot more of their story, which I'm not going to tell here because it's their story to tell, but they've experienced a lot that many of us have never had to. And yet they continue to persist. And I think they would like to come here one day. There's some work that needs to be done to heal from that trauma. But I think we're a step in that healing journey. And that is an amazing thing. We have our mission partners across the world, but we also have our partners here, working with Habitat for Humanity to build a house in our parking lot, once again, last year. Opportunities to connect with them, to connect with individuals who are working towards having their own home. Because if you can imagine it, what it is like to not have a place, a stable place to live, to store your food, to store your clothes, to bathe. Sometimes I think we take our homes for granted, but without them, it's so hard to do many of the things that we need to do in our lives. Habitat for Humanity, La Casa, many other organizations help people to have a home, to keep their home. And this is a big part of why we are here. And of course, there's a photo of a baptism. We do these generally yearly as a way of welcoming people into our community. And I think both the previous categories of practicing community and following Jesus, those lead into this, but there is something important that comes as we make a declaration of what's going on inside of our hearts and our minds and our souls. Baptism is not just something that is done to someone in our midst, but it is done with us. And I don't know what your experience with baptism was. Mine came after the sort of typical praying the prayer, and then I was dunked a week later. I didn't know what it meant. So now every time that I am part of a baptism, whether doing it, performing it as the officiant, or on the shore, as it is here at Silverwood, I remember my baptism. And I remember and kind of bring meaning into that memory of what it means to be a part of a community that cares for each other and that strives to bring about the flourishing of all of humanity together in the name of Jesus. Now, of course, I also want to highlight that it's not just through our budget giving that the stories of Silverwood happen. There are many things that happen outside of what we do budgetarily. This year, we received about $24,000 towards K through 12 schooling, just over $10,000 for our benevolence fund, almost $20,000 for our Good Samaritan fund, and received over $60,000 in memorial funds. I included a photo of our video setup, which is just through that window. You can see it sometimes. That was made possible through those memorial gifts. And through the Good Samaritan Fund, we have helped a variety of families and continue to do that. You all know how cold it is outside. Utilities are going to be real expensive this month, and people are going to feel that. And so having the Good Samaritan Fund provides opportunities for us to help meet the physical needs of people so that they can stay in their homes, they can stay healthy, and that they can know that they are loved. So that was a bit of looking back, thinking about how we've spent our money for the goodness of our world and in our ministry here. But we also want to live forward. So as we look back, one of the reflections that I have is that we are a generous people. Thank you. Thank you for your generosity, not only in your finances, but in your time, in your contributions to this body, to this community, to this world, in so many ways. Again, we give at least 15% to our outreach, which is not used to coerce people to come in the door or to make people be something, but is given freely to bring about God's kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. And together we have a big impact. Each one of us could give our little bit, but that wouldn't have nearly the impact that we do because of the work that we do together. I can only swing a hammer so many times, but when you get 20 of us together, we can build a house in the parking lot. I only have so much time to give, but when we add up all of the time given in this congregation, how much that changes things for people in our world. Look, living forward, we want to communicate more, and not in an awkward way. I think there was some anxiety towards the end of last year, in 2025, because our giving was a little off trend, we'll call it that. And in the end, it all worked out. Everything was fine. But I think we've often shied away from talking about money because it makes us feel awkward. It's like, at a dinner party, you're not supposed to talk about religion and politics. And in a church, you're not supposed to talk about money or something like that. But I think there are healthy ways to talk about money, and it's good. And we want to have clear communication about money, about where we are at as a congregation and what that looks like. We also talked about this as a board recently, that we want to look at having like 100% participation of every family or individual in the congregation in some kind of financial commitment to the church. Now, we're not doing that to say we're going to have you bring in your tax returns and we're going to figure out exactly how much money you need to give to church, or that we're going to go around policing everybody. Currently, we have, I think it's just over 80% of our congregation is involved in giving in some way, financially, which is actually really good for a church. But there's something about having everyone participating at whatever level you are capable. Again, we're not going to force people to give a certain amount, but there's a spiritual reality there that we want to encourage. And that's why I want to just briefly touch on the theology of giving. Money is a tool. Like any tool, it has a purpose. And if it is used for its purpose, it will be good. But we have to ask, what does our money build? What comes of our money? Hopefully, we are helping to build the kingdom of God with our money. This won't always be the case. Sometimes we need to do other things. But we also want it to help build our faith. And by that, I mean giving in a way that maybe challenges us a bit. For that, I'll tell a very brief story from my own life. This is a long while ago. I graduated from college, and I had, well, let's just say not a bountiful income at the time. I was working for a particular coffee chain, and as sometimes happens, the income and bills were not matching super well. I was struggling. I was just barely making it. And how I had kind of experienced church was this idea that you give about 10% of your income, give or take. And so as I was experiencing some of this financial hardship, I stopped doing that because I was worried about money. I was worried that I wasn't going to be able to pay my rent or buy groceries. And so I stopped. Several months went by, and I started to feel sort of something in me that was pulling to say, are you sure this is okay? Are you okay with this? And I realized I wasn't. This was something that for me personally, I needed to do because I see myself as a fairly capable person, a person of means and ability, and for me, that can become an idol, my own self-ability. So I looked back, I looked over, when I had last given, and I took a look at what my income was, and I did the math, thank God for Microsoft Excel, figured out. I don't remember now the exact amount, let's just say it was $250. So I wrote the check, dropped it in the offering that Sunday morning. Monday, went to my mailbox, as I often do, found an envelope. I was not expecting this envelope. I got kind of worried because I thought, oh no, is this another bill? I opened the envelope and there it was, a check for $250, the exact amount that I had given. And for me, that was a confirmation. Not that I had done the right thing, but that I could trust God to provide. I don't know if you have stories like this. Maybe that'd be a good story to tell around the lunch table today. But it's those moments that remind me that we live in a world that is endlessly complicated, and in a world where God works anyway. And so in the midst of that, I was encouraged, even though it didn't make all my financial troubles go away at the time. And I'm grateful that I'm not in that place anymore of living kind of paycheck to paycheck. But I do realize that stewardship is important, and taking care of that is important. And that if I let money and my own selfishness control me, that the world would be a darker place. Not only for others, but for myself. Living in that anxiety was not fun. But learning to trust in God built up my faith. And that's what I hope for all of us. I want to end with this commitment to you. We want to be more clear in our communication, as I said. So going forward in the newsletter, which again, I encourage you all to read, at least the first few pages, but really, it's a beautiful thing. We will communicate more clearly where we are at as a congregation, and these numbers don't really mean a lot. This is all just mostly made up, except for the 83%. That is the correct one. We'll communicate, where our regular giving is for the past week, what it looked like last year, to help give a little more context. Is this normal? Is this abnormal? We want to communicate our additional giving, which we've done some of that, but it's helpful for you to know, I think, that the Good Samaritan Fund, we give out, on average, about $2,000 a month. This month already, I think, is closer to $3,000. The Benevolent Fund also has I don't have exact figures on that because that's Community Life that handles that, but that is a fund that helps folks within our own congregation who are experiencing financial need. And sometimes there's months where there's quite a lot of need. And we might not be aware of it, but it is there. We also want to, again, communicate, because our goal is to have 100% participation, to do that by communicating that through this newsletter. And we'll include a lot of people have been asking, can we know how many people were in church? It's like, we do actually keep a tally of that, and I get an email about it, but not everyone does. So we're going to share that information. I think it's helpful, because there have been some Sundays where we've seen the sanctuary pretty full. And so we put this up there not as a, look at how great we are, but we want to put it out there to say, let's be mindful of where we are sitting and how we sit. Maybe there are ways we can sit a little closer together so that we all fit. I don't know about you, but I don't want to lose the closeness we have of having one service together. But also want to be mindful that if we all kind of spread out, as some of us do, we may be unknowingly excluding the possibility of someone sitting next to us. So just to be mindful of that. This isn't me calling you out. There are also lovely seats up front, and some of the back pews have been sat out a little bit, but these front pews, they're super comfortable. Just putting that out there. So as you can see, the story of Silverwood includes our money, but it certainly doesn't stop there. Those of us who you employ here are grateful for the ways that you provide for us, but the money doesn't stop there. The ministry goes on, the community is supported, the children and youth are supported. Things like this worship service can happen because of your generosity, and we are grateful for that. And I recognize this might have gone a little longer than the typical sermon, but hopefully hearing these stories will encourage us as we think and gather later today for our annual meeting, that this isn't just about figures, it's not just about the numbers, but it's about people's lives that are impacted for good. Thanks be to God. Amen.